Hello and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. This time I welcome Nahid de Belgeonne. Nahid has had a varied career, having previously worked in fashion, publishing, technology and wellness. During her menopause, she swapped bricks and mortar studios in central London for her online clinic and now lives by the sea. Her Soothe Programme helps women recover from burnout, anxiety and trauma, and she's now translated all her expertise into a book called Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for, which is out now. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Emma. Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
It's lovely to have you, and I've really enjoyed the book. So yeah, let's get into it. What made you decide to put all of this into book form?
Well, I think like most people who come into this business and come into sort of these industries, the wellness industries, because they're trying to solve a problem for themselves. And so all of my life, I had a really good understanding that movement helped me to regulate. I had this innate understanding that movement helped me to regulate my emotions. So I started running when I wanted to leave home. I started kickboxing when I wanted to leave my first husband. I started yoga when I wanted to leave a very stressful technology job, which was very, very well paid, but gave me no purpose at all. And so I was, I used to suffer from chronic anxiety. I have a burnout mentality because, daughter of immigrants, there's no safety net. You just work, 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 work. And so that was kind of built into my DNA, if you like. And so throughout my life, I've had chronic anxiety. I've had urticaria, which is like a skin kind of stressy condition. I've had neuralgia, and I almost died from a gangrenous appendicitis
Oh my
because I just
goodness.
didn't listen to the signals from my body and just thought, I'll be fine, take a paracetamol, keep going.
Push on through.
Yeah, push on through. And my work is it's science based, but it's through movement. So I help you to rewire your brain through movement. So I'm starting at the beginning of the movement process, which is the brain, to affect the end of the process, which is muscle. And so there's lots of research that I have to do. And when I teach, I give people um, a lot of the concepts and the rationale behind what we're doing. Because I think if you know what you're doing, you're more likely to do it. And the reason I do that isn't to obfuscate, but it's actually to really make it very clear. It's very accessible why we're doing this, why it works, and da da da. And because I do so much research, I just thought actually it would be great to do long form and write down all the ideas in my head about what it is, why it works, and why it's good for you. And I actually throughout just before COVID, I was approached by a publisher, so it kind of took off from there.
Well, I am a self-confessed biology geek, so I love all of the kind of the neuroscience and the
Yeah.
biology in any book of this kind. And I think it's really helpful to kind of understand. And there are a couple of light bulb moments that I've sort of picked out to talk about you through the course of this interview. But it's kind of like, oh, that makes perfect sense. That is a thing that happens, and then understanding that kind of neuroscience or the biology behind it is really, really empowering.
It is, and it's empowering, Emma, because once you know it's your biology, you then don't go round and round in your head thinking, I'm defected, I'm broken, it's me. You just think, actually, it's my biology. So all I have to do is kind of correct that or write it or tend to it in some way.
Work with it, not
Well,
against
yeah,
it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly that.
So apparently we're experiencing an epidemic of burnout in this sort of post-pandemic landscape, whatever you want to call it.
Mm.
I'm fairly sure if I asked those listening to this podcast today to tell us if they felt they might be experiencing burnout, probably a good chunk of them would put their hand up and say, yes, probably. So for those of us with sort of these really frantic, hectic, busy lives who feel like there's really very little slack in the system, how can we kind of carve out time for things like, you've got specific exercises in the book? Where would you suggest that people start if they don't know where to start?
Well, I think one of the first things is it's your responsibility to carve out some time. Because if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And our lives are so frenetic, but we also have been groomed and conditioned to do more and more and more. And often it's the mothers actually that end up with I think there's a message, isn't there, in our society where you, as a working mother, you have to break yourself to be able to provide for everyone else. And I think there's something very toxic about that and wrong.
Mm,
And I think that makes women just push and push and push and think that they actually their care isn't very important. But I'll tell you one thing that I think is really helpful for people who put themselves at the bottom of a priority list in terms of, tending to themselves. But if you regulate yourself, you also non-verbally regulate everybody around you. So if you have and I've done this many times by stealth with midlife women who are a bit anxious about, their stressy husbands make them feel anxious. They love them, but they have a real stress pattern. And so my advice to them is, once you regulate yourself, they will also regulate as well. And people around you will learn by
that sort of
example.
domino effect of it
Yeah,
rippling
absolutely.
outwards
It
from
ripples out.
the
It's a ripple
centre.
out effect. Exactly. So the very first thing that you could do is just not be on all the time. So make sure that, you're really relishing having a cup of tea in the garden with no one bothering you or asking questions or you scrolling. It's to carve out those times that your brain is not being constantly stimulated, because we think, sitting and watching something, a Netflix film, a thriller or something like that, that gets your heart rate up. We kind of think that's relaxing, but it isn't,
Mm,
because you're still stimulating the brain. So just having a very clear idea and very clear points in your day where you are doing something that's calming and non-stimulating. It doesn't have to be meditation. It doesn't have to be yoga. It just could be gardening without music, without a podcast, and just being really absorbed in the moment. It could be, I mean, in the book I talk quite a lot about the 6x6 breathing. I think we've overcomplicated everything. I mean, I think what we're really good at doing is we're really good at gathering content like magpies. We
mm.
gather things and
It's like,
knowledge.
and multitasking. Like I can listen to this podcast while I do the
Exactly.
washing up, and I
Yeah, yeah,
can.
exactly. And actually, we're very good at gathering information, but we're not very good at embodying it. And it's the embodying part, that's where I come in. And that's what my work is all about. Because if you are wholly engaged in what you do, the research shows that your levels of contentment go up. So it's that thing of fragmented brain trying to do many things all at once that will make you feel anxious, it'll make you feel stressed, and you are indeed stressing out your system because it's just
Mm,
that constant information. And if you think about it, your brain sits in a black box, which actually blew my mind when I kind of found out this sort of concept, or kind of understood this concept. You feed all information into it through your senses. It just happens that our visual sense and our audio sense, visual probably overrules everything else in the culture that we live in. But we
mm,
have so many more senses, and that's where interoception comes in. Interoception is listening in to the signals that your body is giving you. It's termed, it wasn't until recently termed as a hidden sense, and there's lots of interest in it because now we have the advent of neuroscience, so we understand a lot more and we can measure these signals. And when you are able to listen into these signals and then act according to what you need, you are going to have much better outcomes in terms of health, in terms of stress levels, in terms of inflammatory responses, because you're dealing with your micro stressors as they happen throughout the day, rather than waiting right at the end of the day. You're really
mm.
stressed out to the max, and then you do some yoga and you think, you wonder why you go to bed
Why isn't
crying,
it working?
hungry, and yeah, and still stressed.
What's
Because we approach it as a more doing, and
Yeah.
actually what my message is, do less.
Do less. Well, lots of people have probably heard of proprioception, but
Yes.
maybe not interoception. So, is it quite a subtle difference, or are they two
Yeah,
completely
so
different things?
proprioception is where you are in space. It's your senses and your joints kind of being able to, through pressure, understand where you are in space. It's really important. They're all important. And interoception is being able to tune into the signals coming from your body. So it's an internal sensing.
Right. And actually, it's interesting, kind of thinking about those sort of the the busyness that quite often we feel like we have to ignore those kind of signals. It's like, I'm thirsty. Oh, I haven't got time to stop and have a drink, or I'm hungry. I haven't got time to stop and eat, or, I'm tired, but I can't stop and rest, or all of those things. So
Yeah.
it's almost like you've got to relearn
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
relationship with your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet again, I think we've just been groomed for so many decades to not trust our own senses and to not understand what comfort feels like, because we live in a culture that's so uncomfortable. So it's all about internalizing rather than externalizing your comfort. And what might that be? It might be coffee. It might be buying crap you don't need. It might be, pushing beyond. It might be, to have a really good life, you have to have lots of experiences, going out to restaurants, going to the museums and the art galleries. And do you know what I mean? Like cinema and
More, more,
lots,
more,
lots,
more,
lots,
more.
lots, lots, more, 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 more. And actually, I know lots of people who on their last day of the holiday dread coming back home again, because actually an ideal way to be is live in a way that you never feel like you need a holiday, just to be able to incorporate small practices where you're calming the system and you're just enjoying being as opposed to doing.
Mm. So I think one of those, I pulled out a few things from pieces from the book, but this was quite an interesting one. Um, so you write, when we feel our bodies pressed against a solid surface, it sends a message to our brains that we are safe and secure. What's happening there, and what are the ways that we can kind of use that to soothe ourselves?
Yeah, sure. So there's two things that your nervous system really needs. And your nervous system, just so I'm clear and everyone understands what I'm talking about, is your brain, your spinal cord, the communication from that into your body and from your body back in. So it's
Mm,
this ongoing communication. And whereas one time we thought we were a brain with a body, we now realize we're actually a body with a brain. So there's more communication coming from the body up. It's called a bottom up approach.
hmm
And actually, the truth is, it's a kind of all the way in approach, top down, bottom up, outside in, inside out. It's ongoing. Um, and and so that's what interoception is, to listen to those signals. Um, and so, what is going on there? So, the two ways you can keep your nervous system safe is by feeding it information of where you are located. Are you on your feet? Are you on your back? Because if you think about it, when you're in gravity, you're doing a lot of recalibration with where you are because there's nothing to feel. Yeah. And remember that idea that your brain is a black box, it doesn't know anything. So, it
mm,
has to then take in information from your feet to understand that you're standing. And maybe, as you move through the air, it understands the pressure of through the joints, that you are suspended, or you're suspended in gravity, so it understands that. When you're on the floor, and you're lying on your back, your extensor muscles, those muscles that work quite hard to keep you upright, and if they didn't work, you just fall forwards. So they're contracting to keep you upright. They get to release, and even the most distressed person will feel a real innate deep sense of relief when they come to lie on the floor.
It's like the last bit of a yoga class where you do
The last bit of the yoga
that's
class, yeah,
like,
where you're just
I
like,
could do that all day.
it's really funny actually, to my shame, I used to walk out of that bit because it wasn't any doing.
Like,
I was like,
what a
I'm not
waste of
proud of
time.
it. Until of course I learned the benefits of it all. But and so how might people use that? Well, for instance, I often tell my clients who are having a panic attack, get your back against the wall.
Mm,
Go immediately. Quite recently somebody rang me up and said, I'm in Paddington and it's really busy and I'm in sensory overload and I don't know what to do and my breathing's getting shallow. And I was like, get your back against the wall right now.
right.
Now you're there.
It's
Do you
that
feel good?
powerful, just
Yeah, it's
like,
that powerful.
yeah.
Just feel you've got some support, and then your brain just goes, okay, I know where I am. And so it helps you to get out of the rumination in your head and connect to something new. Because what the brain loves, it loves novel, something new. And the stories that go round in your head are old, aren't they? They're the same, same, same. Round and round they go. So it's like actually what you're doing when you put your back against the walls, you're shifting the focus of your brain from ruminating,
Mm,
anxiety, stress, or whatever it is you've gotten into, to like boom,
a mini
this new
reboot,
feedback coming in.
just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
let's just stop.
yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And how and is that the same? So you talk in the book about sort of this restorative rocking
Mm.
technique. Is
Yeah.
that sort of along similar lines?
It sort of is and it isn't. So first of all, you're lying on the floor, so your body knows you're safe. And the rocking's really interesting because it's an oscillation and your cells oscillate. We are actually moving organisms. We're not meant to be still. So movement helps you to regulate your emotions and a lot more. When our brains developed, and they didn't actually develop for thinking, they developed for complex movement and organizing in social groups. So when we were hunter gatherers,
Mm.
and so movement is actually a lot more powerful than just getting your steps in or losing weight or whatever else that we've been sold the idea of. Everything's quite reductive, I think, in our culture, because really we've been groomed to just buy stuff, externalize our comfort and
Mm.
not actually be able to feel it. And if you go to, any older cultures, of course, they're doing it all the time. You have people in parks practicing Tai Chi or Qigong. You had people practicing yoga together. It wasn't all about these little sort of nice, clean LA looking studios where only the privilege go to.
Mm.
It was for everyone. Your grandmother would be doing it in the sari. It was kind of like for everyone really in the community, just to move and to be seen as a really normal healthy thing. Whereas of course we're stuffed into seats, sitting down all day, overly stimulating our brains but not moving to help regulate that.
Mm.
So it's really interesting. So what happens with the rocking is you're on the floor, you feel your brain knows you're safe. When you start to rock, it helps to connect up through your bones. So your bones have a relationship with each other. When you move through the bones, it's a much deeper, profound way of moving than your muscles, which are a bit more superior, a bit more closer to the surface. When you move through your bones, your muscles will kind of come along for the ride. And what you're in effect doing is you're discombobulating the brain. It doesn't know what's going on. So it contracts muscles that you might need for it, and it releases muscles that you might not need. So you're in effect going in and out of your habit. And what happens is that muscles you don't need release. So your habitual muscles that you've been contracting because you're already stressed, they slowly start to release. So that when you stop rocking, you'll kind of notice that you just feel a bit wider and a bit more spacious. And it's quite an incredible thing. Yeah. So it's a really good way to recalibrate your bones, recalibrate tension, recalibrate from stuff. So I pretty much spent most of COVID lying on my back, rocking, rocking and
In
crying
the corner.
and yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah. And just helping to process because, Emma, the most appropriate response to a cortisol is a hormone that gets released
Mm.
through stress, and your body doesn't know what your stress is. Yeah, it doesn't know that you're anxious or you've got an old trauma issue or whatever. It just sees it as an alarm. So I prefer to call it an alarmed state rather than stress. I think is a bit
Mm.
emotive. But anyway, what happens is cortisol releases, and the most appropriate thing to do with cortisol is to move it out. You
Well,
don't
because that
sit with
that
it.
was designed to help us run away from the
Yeah, you
proverbial
boost
saber-tooth
drive. Yeah,
tiger or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you sit with cortisol in you, which most of us do, that's where you get, a long-term kind of doing that for over a long period of time can lead to inflammatory diseases.
Mm.
So it's kind of really important to get out this hormone that is designed to make you move. And rocking will help you do that.
Oh, interesting. So, I mean, in the same way that you could also kind of go for a 10-minute walk around the block, but
Yeah.
if you can't do
Yeah, yeah,
that, then
it's still slightly different in the same way. So all movement will do something to help
mm.
you get rid of cortisol. Rocking slightly different because it's gentler. You're on your back, and it's kind of you're looking at that transmissions of forces through your bones. It helps to recalibrate them because when we sit up and with our head forward and we're on laptops all day, your bones
Mm.
get out of whack. And really, they want to stack one on top of the other. So I don't know if you've tried the rocking, but you will find that not only do you feel quite peaceful, but when you get up, you feel like you're much better organized and in a way that your bones are stacked one on top of the other.
I'm not very good at reading instructions. I'm much more of a visual learner. So,
Yeah,
if we look on your Instagram, for example, is
yeah.
there
There is
like a
there is
video?
something on there. Yes, there is
Okay,
there is something on there, and there's also I have a Substack with lots of videos on there.
okay, we'll put some links into the show notes.
Yeah.
Um, So this was another one that I think sort of spoke to me. It said
Mm.
the brain's job is to keep us alive by budgeting our resources. Your brain is constantly predicting what will happen to you next. Um, And I think I knew that anyway, but I think just seeing it written down there really sort of brought it home to me that our brains are working so incredibly hard in kind of our modern world. So are there any other ways that you sort of suggest in terms of giving our brains a break? Because we've talked about sort of the movement and the rocking, but are there other sort of great techniques?
Yeah, so you could do things like we're very led by our visual system. So be kind of very conscious of that, because what happens when you're staring at a screen all the time is that your lens, your the distance that you're watching gets hardened and fixed.
Mm.
And anything that gets fixed in your body for long periods of time is sending alarm signals to your brain. So
Ah.
I do a lot of things like where I'll warm up my hands, I'll put my hands over my eyes. I roll them a lot. I do a small, slow figure of eight with them as well. Um, and getting up away from your laptop is really important. I mean, we were just both talking about our setup, and I'm lucky enough to have great big windows and work in the garden, and with windows looking over. So I can get out a lot, and I do it a lot more now. I understand that being in a fixed state is an alarm signal for the body. I do it a lot more. I used to think it was just about eye health, but it isn't. It will have a huge influence on your nervous
Mm.
system
So even
when you
just like
are.
open the window, look out into
And
the
look,
distance.
yeah, look out to the far distance and look at something close, and just keep changing the range of your eyes. And that's why it's so good to go out walking in greenery, because you've got the benefits of walking, which is immediately calming on the system, and the greenery, which is calming on the system. And then you've got your eyes constantly looking at different, lengths of focus, which is very calming on the system. And of course, you've got no traffic and people that you have to dodge, because that means that you're still in an alert. And so there's something very calming. I mean, walking in greenery is probably one of the best things that you can do. It doesn't have to be for long, but
Mm.
if you can do it throughout your day, great. If you have a garden, great. Lucky you, get out in that quite a bit and get your hands, in the soil and with nature and doing something that you can be fully absorbed in. But also, I mean, I know that there's lots of messaging now about social media. It's not just social media, it's our phones. Just treat your phone as something, a rare and precious commodity, rather than something that you're sort of clutching on for dear life. That's almost like an appendage. Keep it as a really rare and a precious thing, because now we found out that not only are the raw materials causing slavery in the Congo, but it our phones really divide us. If you're sitting there,
Mm.
actually, I'll tell you a really good story. Years ago, I teach people on retreats, and I had to put a rule in because it was all good. Everyone used to talk around the table. And then when mobile phones came in, social media and all the rest of it, people would have their phones out. So I had to put a rule in saying, no, no, we're not doing this. No phones around the table, please, because these are communal spaces. And you have conversations with people when you don't have your phone, and social interaction is hugely soothing for the nervous system. So it's not just the people that you know and love dearly and get on with. And because many of us ended up working from home, and maybe we do a hybrid, we kind of think, oh, I'm seeing the other person who works from home here, and that's good. But it's actually all those other gentle interactions that you have with people. Perhaps the guy you see all the time walking his dog as well at the same time. There's little side of the mouth conversations that you might have that aren't very meaningful, but
Mm.
they're actually incredibly meaningful to your system. So increasing and expanding your social interaction, if you can, I think is really key, because being in community is hugely soothing for the nervous system. So you can see, can't you, that you can build these things quite gently into your life.
Mm.
Um, it's not exercise, it's kind of having practices that tune you back to being human again.
And I think there's a part where you're talking, talking about that sort of social connection that for our ancestors, an important part of dealing with sort of stressful situations is that reconnection to their community, to their tribe or something after that event had passed. And I think that, again, that's something that we have lost, right? There's
Yeah,
that social connection that allows us to kind of gently kind of relive something, kind of let off steam.
yeah,
Lots of us are lucky enough, thankfully, to kind of have good friendship groups where we can oh my god, you're not going to believe what happened. But
yeah.
actually, for many of us, we may not have enough of that. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe we also sometimes relegate friendships and talking to people as a social thing. So I think we're very good at sort of putting things in boxes and then we make time for those things. But actually, if you can kind of embed them into your daily life, and it could be, the girl, the person you see in the coffee shop, or it could be very, very small interactions, but that constant interaction with people on a daily basis is so much more important. I mean, so much more that when I was researching it, I make sure I get out as well, because I can get quite insular when I'm working with people online and I have a really lovely space to work in. And my husband works at home. And you could get quite insular thinking, well, this is enough.
Mm.
But I actually make myself go out every day to have those little interactions with people because, yeah, again, it just is very soothing to the system. So you will just find your well-being increased by that.
Do you think, sort of, as a human species, we're starting to recognize more that we can't sustain this sort of breakneck speed that we're living at, and just how much the sort of the stress we're experiencing collectively is making us unwell?
Yeah, I do actually. I think COVID helped us to see that. I think there's quite a lot of interesting things happening. So there's the 4-day week project that was
Mm.
actually very successful, but has been quashed by quite a lot of the media because they don't
Just
want
sort
us
of
to
back
do
to the
that.
office, everybody cracking the whip.
And they want to see us back into the office. Why? Because then it helps commerce, doesn't it? You've got the landlords, the rent that they're paying. There's something about the British psyche which is awful. And I don't forget, I teach quite a lot of the CEOs, the old school CEOs as well, which is that they don't trust their workers if they're
Yeah.
not in front of them, which is awful. And it's a very American idea. Whereas actually, in the information age, you can't possibly sustain your focus for 8 hours. It is not possible. In fact, there was a piece of research done that showed that you're productive for about 3 hours a day at work, or 3.5, something like that, and the other time you're pretending to work, which is really stressful. I remember doing that when I worked in my only ever job in an office in technology. And as I say, it was really well paid. But, after I had done the work and delivered the project, I was like, why can't I go home now? I have nothing
Yeah,
more
I'm
to
gonna sit
do.
here till
I
5:30 and
I need to go and
look
get on
busy.
with my job, and then I'd have to think about something to do until 5:30, and that was the thing that really stressed me out. It was like, how can I prove my worth to you when actually I had done the job? So I find that really interesting. So actually, I think there's from the ground up, I think there's a real understanding that we don't want to live that way. And
Mm.
actually, our societies, Western societies in particular, and possibly globally nowadays, but is completely geared to work, not to the human. And we need to change that. And I think the 4-day week would do that. And I think us getting a bit savvier about our use of media and about being really, really, really careful about our time and our personal time. Like, when are you going to spend time with your kids and your partner? One day, one day. And don't forget, Emma, I deal with people all the way from their 20s to their 80s. And I'm seeing people in their 70s who are recovering from heart disease because they work so hard. Do you know what I mean? And I'm seeing people who in their 50s who had strokes because they worked so hard. So what are we working so hard for if we're not enjoying our lives? So I think we have to really address that. And actually, a friend of mine works in France, and he was saying when he went over there, he was just like, I can't believe it. They have 11-week holidays. You're not allowed to contact anyone outside of 7 o'clock. And then after about a year of living there, he said, it's great.
Yeah, I think
Great.
it's the right to sort of switch off, isn't it? And I think there's something in the Labour manifesto about them
Brilliant. Brilliant.
maybe implementing that. So it'll be
That is
interesting
so
to see
brilliant.
if
So
that happens.
I think, if the 4-day week came in and then we had things like that, and then we ourselves get really cherish our own time and just get really kind of protective about that, I think that will make a big difference. Because, as ever, change never really comes from the top. It has to be protested about and fought for from the bottom up.
Yeah. That seems like a good place for us to wrap up. Nahid, thank you so much. If people want to find you online, find out more about you, obviously I'll put a link in the show notes to buy a copy of the book if they're interested. I think it's out in paperback. I have
Yes,
a
it
paperback
came
copy.
straight out in paperback, and it's got, just to tell you a little bit about it, it's got the science and the concept at the beginning, and then it has the days split up into day parts of different things that you can do that are really easy to fit in. And then you've got an end section that just gives you lots of ideas about things that you can do when you need things in the moment. It's called Emotional Rescue. It's available in paperback. And to find me, I'm at www.thehumanmethod.co.uk. And you'll be able to see I've got a really great program, which is 12 weeks to help to regulate your nervous system. It's specifically aimed at burnout and chronic anxiety. And then I teach every other month in London on day retreats, so that you have a lovely morning practice to energize and an evening practice or an afternoon practice to kind of deeply restore. And we're using, lots of kind of brain to body communication kind of techniques and strategies. And then there's a lovely lunch in the middle, and you get to join in with lots of like-minded people, and that's always really fun. And then I take people abroad as well. So I do lots of in-person and lots of online.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It's been a real joy.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, everyone. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.